So this part of the video, why I wanted to split this video, is because this video is going to be pretty much exclusively about the balance changes. We've talked about the beginning, we've talked about the campaign, we've talked about the thoughts, we've talked about how grindy it is. Now, I love the combat in this game. The combat in this game feels good to play. It's a good balance between making you feel powerful and making you feel challenged. Although there are moments that are completely unfair, especially if you're underleveled, because you never want to fight something that's more than 4 levels higher than you, which kind of makes the jump with Cathedral of Light very difficult. However, let's talk about something. You notice I don't have a Rogue. Rogue is broken. Rogue gets by with literally 2 legendary aspects. 2 legendary aspects. You can literally run commons, not even rares, in the rest of your slots, and you're fine. You're fine, as long as you have the 2 aspects. There's a lot of videos online that tell you about Sorceress is the weakest class in the game, that Necromancer is the weakest class, that Druid is the weakest class in the game, right? And pretty much everybody consensusly agrees that Rogue is the strongest class in the game. And a lot of people think that Barbarian is the strongest, if not the second strongest, and they keep getting nerfed into the ground. Let me tell you something. The problem that this game has doesn't come down to one individual class. It's not that Sorceress is the weakest class in the game. It's not that Necromancer is the weakest class in the game. It's not that Druid is the weakest class in the game. It is the lack of available options that are available to the player that are good endgame content. Now, here's a problem that you're going to notice. Endgame builds are very different than beginning game builds. You cannot make a build from the beginning of the game and expect you to carry. You're going to get a legendary aspects that completely change how your build works. Most players stop using basic skills. Key passives and ultimate skills suck on half of the classes in this game and are overpowered and broken for the other half. So let's talk about some things here. Let us look at this. Let's look at Sorceress. Sorceress is the most popular, most played class in the game, and it literally has 2 builds that are any good. There's 4 possible builds, and there's only 2 that are any good. So, that's really the problem that this game has. And this video is going to have a couple of tips in here that I wish Blizzard would pay attention to. Alright? Now, in this game, this is not like D3, where you're literally just picking, you pick 6 skills, you pick a rune to upgrade the skill, you pick 3 key passives, and then you go farm legendaries for what you want. Okay? Or, this is not like D2, where you're going and you're grinding for skill points, and you're like leveling something up to 20, and you're begging that you can get to 20 on that skill. Let's talk about how this works. Every class is designed to have 3 builds in the game. For Sorceress, you have Frost, Pyromancy, and Shock. Basically, you have Fire, Ice, and Lightning. Okay? Makes sense. So, for Sorceress, for example, you have 4 builds. You have Pure Ice, Pure Fire, Pure Lightning, and Battle Mage, where you're mixing it up. So let's talk about the problem right here. So the first thing you do is you have to choose a basic skill. This is an Ice Sorceress, so I'm picking a basic skill. And the first thing that you're going to notice is, wow, my damage is very high on a basic attack. I'm dealing 53% damage. What does that mean? So it's based off the damage of your weapon. Okay? My weapon right here is dealing this amount of damage. 1100 damage per second. Now you see my attack power is 1600. Okay? Now, you're wondering, okay, fine, then how am I dealing 1400 as a high roll if it's supposed to be dealing 50%? The reason for this is the intelligence stat. If you see how I have an intelligence of 351, intelligence increases the skill damage for this class, because this class's key skill is intelligence. Barbarian uses strength, Necromancer and Sorceress use intelligence, Druids use willpower, Rogues use dexterity. So by buffing my intelligence up, I deal more damage. Okay, that's an easy way to cheese the system, right? So that's why I'm dealing so much damage. So I must be dealing an absolute metric fuck ton of damage. Not really. It's a basic skill. It's spammable because it doesn't cost mana. Now I get 2 upgrades. I have a mandatory upgrade, which is great, which is usually okay. And then I have a choose my own upgrade, which is there to, like, give the player some semblance of choice. And 90% of these, one option is always the superior option. Mana or vulnerable against some enemies, which I can already apply vulnerable 30 different ways on this class. Look at this one. Spark has a chance to form crackling energy or increase critical strike chance per cast. And I'm spamming this ability. What do you do? Mana on burning targets when every skill in your inventory causes burning damage, or critical strikes increase burning damage. Hitting a stunned enemy reduces all of your cooldowns by a short duration, or movement speed for every single enemy hit by Arc Lash, which hits multiple enemies. You see how, like, they give you the illusion of choice, but some of these options are clearly better than others. Okay. These skills right here all suck. And you might ask, well, why have you put 5 points into it? Because this is a basic skill that I'm casting often, because I don't have the ability to make uber mana builds where you're costing no mana. Because they're very specific, and they require a ton of aspects, and a ton of very specific skills. Okay, so Ice Sorceress, by the way, is the best sorceress in the game. Why is Ice Sorceress the best sorceress in the game? Well, it has the best basic skill, because it deals the most damage. This scales at 53%. This scales at like 14%. This scales at like 16%. This scales at like 52%. This is the highest damage of the basics at level 5. Okay, fine. Look at these skills. Ice Shards is just loaded with legendary aspects. The earliest legendary aspects in the game you'll get for this character are Ice Shards. Frozen Orb gets really no love, and when you use it, this is single target, this is crowd control. You can't build this for single target damage. You can build this for crowd control. You have 2 defensive options, which I'll get to that in a minute. Your Conjuration is relatively shitty, which is fine, because you make up for that with Blizzard, which is awesome and not enough people run it. Your ult is good, you have the best ult out of the 3 builds, and you have 2 key passives that every character would love to fight over. Most classes aren't fighting over key passives, right? Then you look at the Fire Tree. Very little direct damage, burning over time, which is not good. Damage up front, burning over time. Damage up front, this is probably the best skill in the Fire Tree besides Hydra and Flame Shield. But Flame Shield doesn't count because it's defensive, which I'll get to that in a moment. Hydra, it's meh. You summon it, you have to remember to re-summon it when you move it around. Just sits there and peppers away some chip damage. Yay. You have Meteor, which is slow to hit. It is damage over time. You have Firewall, which is damage over time. You have Inferno, which is an area of effect ability that's not very large and not very impactful. Basically, it just sucks enemies in and does burst damage. This whole tree is damage over time, and damage over time in this game absolutely sucks. You want to kill shit as quickly as possible. You look at Lightning Sorceress. Lightning Sorceress has 2 primaries. This is your long range option. This is your close range option. This is good damage, but it requires you to get up and brawl. Sorceresses don't want to do that unless they're running a ton of defensive skills. Then look at these skills right here. Chain Lightning is okay. It's okay. It's decent chip damage, but it's not that impactful. Charge Bolts is impossible to hit accurately without 3 or 4 legendary aspects. So you're not running that. Lightning Spear is okay. You're pretty much running it because it's a cooldown. It has no mana cost, so you can basically just chuck this out every once in a while and spam your other skills. Ball Lightning has an absurd mana cost. Yeah, it's a decent skill, but the damage isn't worth the mana cost. You need legendary aspects to make it viable. And then you have your ult, which is... it's okay. The cooldown's a bit high, but it makes sense. You have one legendary aspect that requires you to build around, or key path that requires you to build around it. You have one that's okay, and you take that by default. If you look at the fire aspects, you have this one right here, which is very mediocre. It's based around crits. And you have this one right here, which is bonus burning damage, which again, damage over time sucks. So, none of the key passives on fire is good. None of the key passives on lightning are good. And then ice gets two broken ones. You have avalanche, where every time you cast a frost skill, you have a 10% chance that your next ice shard, frozen orb, or blizzard, which are your damage skills, consume no mana and deal increased damage. And that 10% chance becomes 20% against vulnerable enemies, and literally everything in your build makes it vulnerable. Has a chance at making things vulnerable. And there's a key legendary you can get very easy that doubles this to the next 2 casts of a skill. Not just 1, 2. This is the broken one, and that's not including Shatter. Whenever a frozen enemy's freeze expires, the enemy explodes and deals 25% of the damage that you dealt to them while they were frozen as damage to surrounding enemies. And if the freeze expires because the target died, that's a lot of damage. Remember that. Like, this is the weaker of the 2 passives, and it's better than all 4 of these combined. Now, another thing that I really am annoyed by are these little side passives that you have right here. Because these aren't impactful enough, and this is where you're going to be spending most of your skills if you're trying to build a pure build, right? So if you look at this, I have this up for my ice barrier. I have this up for an instant freeze. I have this up because I have a barrier up relatively consistently, so it's giving me more chill to freeze it. I have this up for bonus damage. I have this up for bonus damage. But you notice I'm not really running these, because they're kind of mediocre. They're not great for what I want to do. And you see how there's these other key passives right here that are okay, but you're never really building into it. Like, this is a battle mage skill where you're supposed to run 3 conjurations, which no one's doing that because they're all cooldowns. And they're all cooldowns that upgrading the skill from level 1 to 5 doesn't reduce the cooldown. It doesn't reduce the mana cost. It just increases the damage of the skill. Why? That's a common problem I have with a lot of these. This increases barrier amount as it scales. Not duration, not cooldown. This increases the duration of the ability and the damage of the ability, not the cooldown. This is one of the few that upgrading it reduces the cooldown, but the cooldown is minuscule. I have this at 22.49 seconds base. If I have another character that I have 5 points into this, and it's at 18 and change. So I'm shaving off about a second. Is that really worth 5 points for a 4-second cooldown reduction? And that's really the thing that you have. And if you look, you need the key passives behind it. You're going to find that there's a lot of skills in this game, maybe not on this Ice Sorceress build, where you're not going to be upgrading all of your skills to level 5 because the key passives are sometimes better on other classes. Like, Sorceress is one of these classes where, depending on your build, you're fighting for points. If I had extra points here, I would probably chuck them into these more minor key passives. I'm not really struggling for anything. You can't upgrade Deep Freeze, and you can't upgrade the key passives. Think about it this way. If this was D3 and I had 3 key passives, Yeah, I would slap on Shatter, obviously. There'd be a few more options here. I'd slap on 1 or 2 of them, but because there's only 1 key passive, other classes don't have that luxury. Now, the thing that makes this class unique, by the way, is the attunement system. So I can run enchantments, right? So if you notice how every skill in the tree has an enchantment effect to give me extra passives. That needs to be on every single class in the game. Every single class in the game should have the ability to run enchantments. Maybe give Sorceress the ability to run 4 or 6 enchantments to make them stronger. Like, you could have it at, like, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Do it like that if you wanted to. And then the other classes get 2. I think enchantments are very important to your build. And a lot of Sorceress players are about, oh, yeah, they need extra enchantment slots because literally everybody is running this. Because there's an aspect where you gain mana from damaging burning enemies. Like, you get mana from burn. So, it's infinite mana build. Literally, the flame shield is broken. And this is the problem that I have with all the skills in the game. Is that almost every single character's defensive skills and, like, extraneous skills, like those extra skills, are just better than straight damage options. Because if you look right here at straight damage options, Ice Shard is the best skill out of this whole tree right here. Chain Lightning is okay. Fireball is okay. Frozen Orb is okay at best. And Incinerate and Charge Bolt are terrible. And if you look at the other primary damage options, Blizzard is great. Ball Lightning is okay at best. Firewall is okay at best. Meteor is okay at best. You're not fighting for, oh god, gee willikers, I have to really fight to get Meteor on my build. Every Sorceress is trying to fight between, okay, what do I want for defensive skills? All of her defensive skills are good. Hey, do you want complete crowd control and damage immunity on a short cooldown that also fucking heals you? It's one of the only abilities in the game to straight up heal you for chunk healing. And it makes you damage immune. And crowd control immune. And you can cancel crowd control into it. Hey, do you want frozen armor that gives you a good chunky barrier where damage you deal is then added to that barrier that also reduce your fucking mana cost, basically, and has a chance to freeze enemies, giving you more crowd control? Do you want the ability to instantly freeze any enemy around you, reduce the cooldown by killing those enemies, and then either generating mana or crowd controlling them further? Do you want the ability to just teleport anywhere on a ridiculously short cooldown and deal some damage and get crowd control? Like, all of these skills are good. You're legitimately, you can run a Sorceress with all 4 of these defensive skills. A mana generator and a mana spender. And be like, yep, I'm good. I'm good. I don't need ultimates. I don't need I just need this. And this is the tankiest class in the game behind Druid, in my opinion. This character can tank anything between Flame Shield, Ice Armor, which is 2 barriers right there. You can get a 3rd barrier off of this passive right here, where anytime you use a cooldown, you're getting a free fucking barrier. Meaning, you can use a Conjuration, which is an offensive cooldown, get a barrier for free, use Ice Armor, which gives you a barrier and there's a cooldown, so it's an even bigger barrier. Use Flame Shield, which is a cooldown, and get a free barrier off of that. Hey, you can use your ultimate, which is on a cooldown, and gives you a barrier off of it. This class is broken on 1 build. And the rest of the builds suck. There's no reason to run Pure Lightning. There's no reason to run Pure Fire. Because they just suck. And this attunement right here is bullshit. Because it's basically a get out of jail free card if you die. This is mandatory, by the way, if you're a hardcore player. I'm sorry, I see people that die as hardcore sorceresses and they don't run this, and I'm like, oh, you're stupid, fuck you. Like, I feel no sympathy for you. You want to talk about other builds? Like, there's no build diversity. And it's funny, I'm going to show you my lightning sorceress real quick. I'm not going to break it down. I just want to show you my lightning sorceress. Which is level 50. It's the same level as the Ice Sorceress. Same point of the game, Nightmare Dungeon, good gear. I'll show you the difference between them, between the two builds. This is very simple. This is a lightning-focused sorceress. Now, if you notice on the ice sorceress, I had one skill that wasn't lightning-based, and that was Flame Shield. Flame Shield was the only non-lightning skill I had. Everything else was pure ice. If I got an extra skill, I'd have Frost Nova. If I got a second extra skill, I would have Frozen Orb. If I got a third extra skill, I might actually have to fight. Right? Because Frost Sorceress is the best. So now let's look at Lightning Sorceress. If it wants to load. Anytime now. The Lightning Sorceress is the second strongest of the builds. This is the second strongest build. So let's look at this. Spark, which, okay, that's max like Frostbolt. It's lower damage, it's 14%, but it does hit 4 times. So, essentially, I'm getting a little bit over 50. Okay? I have Chain Lightning. Again, 1 damage skill. It's hitting 58%. Hits multiple times. Not running Charge Bolt. I'm not fighting for Charge Bolt. I have Flame Shield and Frost Nova. 2 defensive skills once again. And Frost Nova, I'm running over Ice Barrier just for a little bit of uniqueness. It's a little bit unique. Right? I actually have a Conjuration here, which is a lightning skill. 1 point in Ball Lightning just for the enchantment. It's just for the enchantment. It is not at all for the actual effect. And my ultimate ability. I'm running Lightning Mana Generator, Lightning Mana Spender, Lightning Ultimate, Random Lightning Skill, and 2 non-lightning defenses. And I'm running this passive, which is the best of the lightning passive. And it's like, it just buffs me up at close range. Now, remember how I said, if I got extra slots, what would I do with them? Well, my next slot would be Ice Barrier. And the slot after that would probably be Hydra. For passive damage. It's not going to be Charge Bolts. It's not going to be Ball Lightning. Maybe Teleport. But I'm not fighting for options on this build. If I'm being honest, if I could completely drop Frost Nova, not run Frost Nova, take those 5 points and put them into another skill. If I'm going to throw an extra 5 points into, say, Flame Shield, or into Spark, I would probably do that. This build is not fighting for spots, because it's not as good as Ice. It's not like, oh my god, I really have to think. Like, my last 2 points were spent on Elemental Attunement. Because putting in the Lightning Spear wasn't good, because Lightning Spear's cooldown didn't go down. Lightning Spear's lucky hit chance didn't go up. Now, something Blizzard could do to buff builds a little more is maybe give me the ability to upgrade these as the tree upgrades. So, for example, I'm not putting points into this because the only thing that's going up is damage, and it's only going up 1% at a time. Oh, wow, I can get up to 20% damage per hit as opposed to 16% for 4 skill points. Wow. Thanks, I guess? But if that 5% increased critical strike chance for the duration also increased as I put points into the skill, I would be intrigued. If this got 1% increase, I would do that. If Lightning Spear stuns enemies for 2 seconds when critically striking was increased, say, 2.2, 2.4, 2.6, 2.8, 3, I would maybe do that. Another example, let's look at something like Flame Shield, which is something I'm already increasing, right? Like, right now, it's at 2.4 second duration. I've literally buffed it for an extra half-second duration. I don't care about the damage. Imagine if Flame Shield's movement speed bonus went up 5% for each tier. So, instead of it being 25, it'd be something like 45 or 50. Imagine if the healing went up from 50, even if it was 1% a tier, if it went from 50 to 55% of your missing life. That would be broken. Or if there was an extra capstone behind it to upgrade. So if I could only get that capstone skill if I put it at level 5. And that could be game breaking. Even if it wasn't a choose your own. Even if it was. Or if they gave me, like, the ability at level 5, I could spend an extra point and get this mana cost one as well. I would appreciate that. The game doesn't let you do that. The reason it's supposed to be Paragon. You're supposed to upgrade in Paragon. But it makes your skills feel very lackluster and very legendary dependent. You're almost exclusively running just legendary spam into the ground because of that. Now, Sorceress is a class that is so good because of defensive options and ice. And all the other builds are terrible. All of the builds are trash. Its damage options suck. Okay? Now let's look at a class where the damage options are good, the defensive options are good, and that's what makes it overpowered. Let's look at Barbarian. This is the highest level Barbarian I have. This is my Bludgeon Barbarian, okay? Now, Barbarian is a very gimmicky class compared to all the rest, and that kind of leads to cheap gimmicks being effective and builds being terrible by design. Barbarian has the most weapons in the game. They get 4 weapons equipped at any time, whereas Rogue's maximum is 3, Druid's maximum is 2 with a totem and a one-handed or a two-hander. Necro can get a two-hander or a one-handed and a shield or a focus. Sorceress can get a one-handed and a focus or a two-handed. So most classes are limited to 2. Barbarian doesn't have that problem, you see. Barbarian gets to run whatever the fuck they want. They get everything. They get a two-handed bludgeon, a two-handed slash, they get one-handeds. They are not short for options at all. They have this shitty expertise system that works by upgrading your gear. Basically, you upgrade your gear by doing this. You upgrade your gear and by using it, and you get this bonus. And if you play strictly one thing, you're gonna just max it out. Like, I have a little bit of one-handed mace. It's not very good, right? Also, I just want to show this. It's very difficult to choose what skill uses what, right? So look at this. I have to scroll down, hit cycle weapon. And I have to physically assign to any skill I want what I want. Now, let's look at Barbarian, right? Barbarian is in this interesting class where, like Sorceress, it has better ultimate options available to it. It has one stinker in Iron Maelstrom. This is just terrible. The main reason you run it is it's a short cooldown that gives you some bonus damage, I guess. It's not very good. Wrath of the Berserker, I was very fond of this in D3. I thought I would be fond of it here, and it's basically either gimmick Berserker build, or you're running it for Unstoppable for 5 seconds. That's literally it. And it's not worth it for the 5-second Unstoppable. So it's Berserker, or you're not running this. And I didn't like Berserker. Call of the Ancients is the good one, and even then it only lasts 6 seconds. But it's basically this giant chunk, bursty damage skill that lets you wipe out some enemies on the board and then disappears. Right? So their gimmick is between switching weapons. They have builds that are based around switching weapons, where you can constantly switch between weapons. But look at what they have available. You have Arsenal, which is your switching weapons. You have Bludgeon, Slash, and Bleed. Bleed is terrible because it's damage over time. It's absolutely terrible. You deal 5% damage on a basic hit, but oh, you get all this damage on Bleed. I don't care. It takes too long. Like, the whole gimmick with Bleed is it's supposed to be combo based, where you chink away and apply a bunch of Bleed, and then you apply Rupture and just rip all the Bleed damage out at once. Rupture is on a 10-second cooldown. Now, you can reduce this, I think, down to like 7 or 8. seconds. That is not good enough. Honestly, this cooldown should be at no more than 5 seconds if you want people to play this. And the bleed build is terrible for that one reason. It's damage over time, and its cooldown is too long. Its skill is actually okay. Its passive is okay because you can trigger bleeds that are decent. You can get bleed off of Whirlwind, you can get bleed off of Lunge, you can get bleed off of Thorns, and those are common skills to run. So the passive's not bad, just not on this character. Now, here's the major problem that this class has. Like Sorceress, its defensive options are great. So look at what you have. You have Lunge, which is basically a glorified movement ability. You're not using it for damage, you're only using it for Fury generation and mobility. Bash is a terrible damage skill because it's slow. You're only using it for the stun because every 4 hits you stun an enemy. And then you can get Fortify and crit damage, or instead of the crit damage, you can get additional Fury, if that's what you're trying to do. So you can just bash 2 or 3 times, have a stun ready, something like that. Frenzy is only here, it's the lowest damage option, but it's basically only here because of how quickly it attacks. Look at your damage skills. Yeah, they're okay. They're okay, but see, Barbarian has to build their Fury and then spend it before they lose it. Whirlwind Barbarian is what pretty much everybody runs. It's nice. It's okay. It's not great. Hammer of the Ancients, Upheaval, and Double Swing are all in this weird category where they're great if you run this one passive that doubles the Fury cost and does a large chunk of damage. So this is how this build works. You spend 5 seconds generating Fury through Bash. You hit Hammer of the Ancients 1 time, nuke whatever's in front of you, and then basically it's on cooldown until you can generate almost your entire Fury bar back up. Yay! Core skill that I'm using a lot. And if you look at your ulterior damage options, right? Okay, so if I don't want to use those 2 damage options, what do I have? Rupture, bleed build, never mind, it's terrible. Steel Grasp, it does basically no damage. It maybe pulls enemies into you if they're smaller than you and they're trying to run away. It's very inconsistent. What does it do? Oh, it makes them vulnerable and might give you berserking. Yay. It's terrible. Death Blow is kind of fun and gimmicky. It's an overhead smash. If it kills an enemy, the cooldown resets. So you just chain it among weaker enemies. But if you miss it, or you don't kill with it, it's a 15-second cooldown. So it can be nice. It's decent. Even against, like, elites and bosses, where it can be a big, bursty, like, chunk damage skill. But it's mostly, like, crowd clear. It's gimmicky, but it's not great. Now, here's the problem. So you have this brawling tree, and you have this defensive tree. And the brawling and defensive tree kind of go hand in hand, because they're either skills that buff you in combat, skills that keep you alive in combat, mobility skills, or defensive options for, like, aiding you. Kick is the best offensive option, because it consumes, you run the upgrade where it consumes all of your Fury, and you once again get this build, empty all your Fury with 1 kick. Build. That's awesome. Great boss killer. Skill. So again, this is directly competing with your core skills. You might run it alongside it, but now you have no Fury. So you have to get better utility out of these than just me like big damage. Me like big damage. Because kick is better. Now look at your other skills. I have charge, which is a movement skill, and it doesn't charge further enough. I wish there was an upgrade where I could just keep running with this skill, and it would just cost Fury at that point. Leap. It's okay. It needs a legendary aspect from the Codex of Power to be viable, and it makes it more defensive. Ground Stomp is basically an offensive tool. It's a stun on command, and you can use it to reduce cooldowns or generate fury. And it's good for stun builds if it's like, okay, I need to stun something. Like, it's good for double swing, because double swing gets a bonus where you get the fury cost back from double swing if you are damaging a stunned enemy. So you can kind of just go Ground Stomp. You can go Ground Stomp, double swing, double swing, double swing. And it's whatever's in front of you is dead. Pretty easily. That's pretty gimmicky, but it's also on a cooldown. Iron Skin is just terrible because it requires so many legendary aspects to be good. It's very confusing as to how it works. I had to play with this skill about 3 or 4 different times to understand how it works. And it's one of the only healing skills that the Barbarian has in their tree, which really sucks. That this is one of the only skills that you have that can heal. So this is kind of terrible. But you have Ground Stomp, Kick, Charge, and Leap that are all just there fighting for a spot. What are they fighting for a spot on? The shouts. All of the shouts are broken. Rallying Cry is mandatory in every single Barbarian build. It's Fury, it increases Fury generation, and it makes you unstoppable for the duration. Off of 2 skill points, you have fixed your 2 biggest weaknesses in the Barbarian class. Fury generation and crowd control. Because all forms of crowd control in this game kill you. Literally 2 points! Fixes all your problems. It's mandatory to run. Warcry is in the middle. It's nice. It's nice. Not great. 15% bonus damage for you and your allies. That's okay, right? Oh, it grants you Berserking. Oh, it grants you Fortify or bonus damage. Well, that's nice. Wait a minute. It stacks with Rallying Cry? Wait a minute. I can heal life per second for each of these shouts. So having both of these shouts up gives me 6% health per second? Wait a minute. I can increase the duration to 7.5 seconds? Oh, that's very good. This is the weakest of the shouts. And it gives you damage reduction, bonus life, and either Fury or Thorns. This is the weakest of the shouts. So 3 shouts, plus a mana generator, a mana spender, and then you get 1 random brawling mastery or ultimate skill is meta. Because all of the defensive skills are good. So we talked about passives, right? Call the Ancients is good, Berserker is niche in my opinion, and Maelstrom is shit. What about the passives? Gushing Wounds is niche. You need Lunge, Whirlwind, Thorns, or a random bleed build for this to work. Unbridled Rage is great if you're using core skills as basically a cooldown. It changes it from constantly spamming, like you're playing whack-a-mole, to a cooldown essentially. Walking Arsenal is too convoluted to get going. Basically, if you deal damage with a skill, and then use another, you get 10% damage. But you get another 10% damage if you use another skill that switches weapons. And if you use another skill that switches weapons back to the 3rd weapon, then all of your bonuses become 25% instead of 10%. Yay? But all of that has to be done in 6 seconds. And again, look at what your options are for damage, right? The easiest way that I've figured it out is you can run Frenzy for your 2-handed. You can run one of your 2-handed ones, like Upheaval, Hammer, or Whirlwind, for one of your 2-handed. And your other 2-handed could be Death Blow. So you basically just go Frenzy, Frenzy, Whirlwind. You go Frenzy, Frenzy, Whirlwind, Death Blow. Done. But that's stupid. Why is that stupid? Frenzy doesn't deal a lot of damage. Whirlwind costs mana that you might not have. And Death Blow has a cooldown on it. All for a 10% at worst, 45% at best damage bonus. It's 45% by the way. So there's 10% for each of the 3 bonuses, and then you get an additional 15. So it'd be 45. Like, at best, you get 45. You're going to get 10, 20, or 45% damage bonus. And more likely, you're only getting 10 or 20. And then the Berserking build, which is terrible. I've tried to get this to work, and the problem is that Berserks... The issue with Berserk is it's only triggered by very specific skills. So you have to use those skills and proc it to get this to work. Sure, it's chunky damage. But the other problem is Berserk is primarily off of Wrath of the Berserker with Frenzy. If you're not running Frenzy, you're just losing damage. If you don't have high attack speed, you're losing damage. So it's very stupid and convoluted. Like, Barbarian feels powerful, but the only reason it feels powerful is its defensive options are so good. It doesn't have the attunements that the Sorceress has, but it's more versatile because it has multiple plug-and-play options. You can go Bash, Hammer, 3 defensive skills, be fine. You can go Lunge, Whirlwind, 3 defensive skills, and be fine. You can run double-handed, upheaval, double swing, stuff like that, and be fine. Now let's look at Druid. Okay? People say Druid sucks. Druid is kind of a unique situation where it's supposed to be a tank, and it does that very well. Because Druid has the most builds available to it, in my opinion, out of any class in the game. Because it has Pure Earth, Pure Storm, Pure Werewolf, Pure Werebear, Hybrid Shapeshift between Werebear and Werewolf, Hybrid Elemental between Storm and Earth, Hybrid Shapeshift and Elemental, and then Hybrid everything. There's so many builds that are available to you off of this. Okay? In addition to that, you get Spirit Boots, which are basically attunements or passives. You get 5 in total when you end up maxing out a skill, and you can customize these depending on what your build is. This is a nature storm type magician. So obviously I have the storm one. I have this one just for the lucky hit chance to get my cooldown and my ultimate down faster, right? I want this because I want my ultimate up as much as possible. The Fortify is great because this class has great defensive options. The Energize is great because I want spirit regeneration. The Critical Strikes on Companions is okay. It's not great. A lot of these you're generally fighting for. I think giving me the ability to run 2 in each class might be a little bit broken, but a nice power boost. Now look at your abilities. Here's the problem with this tree. This tree has so many options, right? Let's look at them a little bit now. Earth is slow and chunky and based around stunning and crowd controlling enemies. The storm skills are based around vulnerable, immobilizing, and stunning enemies, giving you constant crowd control. Werewolf is based around speed and poison, where Bear is based around fortify and raw damage output. Druid gets massive advantage out of fortifying. They can fortify off of just about any fucking thing they have. There's a fortify tree down here that's just broken that you can just yeet spare points into like I did and get value out of them. Because everything you do is fortify. Here's the problem that Druid has. Druid is one of the shitty classes that their ultimates suck, and a lot of Druids aren't running an ultimate. Because again, defensives are so good. Alright, let's start with companions and get them out the way. There is a companion build. You're not going to run it. You're just going to run 1 companion and be done with it, okay? Look at this. This is just, it takes up a spot on my skill bar. I get passive damage. I get active damage. I get a massive chance to fortify me. And I get bonus damage off of crowd control, which I'm doing pretty much all the time. And oh yeah, I can buff it by 30% more damage. This is absurd right here. Free passive damage. Ravens are okay. Poison creepers are okay. They're not really great. They're niche. Because the Ravens are good for periodic damage and bursty area of effect damage. The Poison Creeper is good for damage over time, but damage over time really sucks. Okay. If you look at Werebear and Werewolf, the shapeshift, the problem is they're very interchangeable, and that kind of makes their ultimates shit. Like, Grizzly Rage locks you into only Werebear forms. So if you want to run this ultimate, you have to run pure Werebear, or you have to run the legendary aspect that changes it to a Werewolf skill, and then you run pure Werewolf. Because all you can run is Elemental. You can't run the other skill. Alright? It makes sense. And Lacerate is just a shitty area of effect skill where you just dash between enemies. You can't really control it. So you could be hitting one enemy for 7,000 damage, or you could be hitting 13 enemies for about 500 damage. Yay! Great skill. The main reason you would run this is because it gives you crowd control and damage immunity, and if it crits, you get a little bit of a heal. Yay! Minor healing on a 45-second cooldown. It's terrible. So, look at your interchangeable skills. Attacks quickly, but deals little damage. Attacks very slow, deals the same damage. So you run Claw. Now the upgrades aren't as good here because this one gives you Fortify and then either knockback or bonus range. This one gives you attack speed and then either poison or a second hit. This is generally better for the attack speed. Okay? You have Shred, which is very convoluted combo damage that you can buff up a little bit. Or you get Pulverize, which just instantly flattens any enemy in front of you every 12 seconds. So you run Pulverize, right? Look at your defensive options. You have shitty damage reduction. Good Fortify. Not as good as Earth and Bulwark, but good Fortify. And then either a slow or a minor heal per second, which is a duration heal. And it's terrible. Because it's a duration heal. So that's 4% healing over 4 seconds. That's 16% of your health in total. Or you can run 1 point of Blood Howl and heal 20%. 1 point of Blood Howl is immediately 20%. If you can get this up, you can get this up to 30%. It also gives you cooldown reduction per kill, and either spirit or healing, or attack speed. This is the obvious winner. Which remember, you can't use if you're running Werebear. And then you have Rabies, which is poison, it's damage over time, and it's terrible. Sure, it can spread, but it's damage over time. Or you have Trample, which is just a big, chunky damage skill that gives you unstoppable. And it can fortify you. And fortify is important for overpower. So you're gonna run that. And that's why you see so many Werebears. Like, a basic bitch build, Claw, Pulverize, Blood Howl, Earth and Bulwark, Wolves, and Trample. And you're good. You don't need an ultimate skill. Because these two ultimate skills, remember, are kinda terrible. And they're gonna lock you into a specific build. So what about Elemental? Okay. Elemental is very interesting because Elemental, this is one of the few classes where their basic skills are actually good long-term. Wind Shear is a long-range piercing attack that hits multiple enemies and generates fury per enemy hit. It also applies vulnerable and gives you either movement speed or bonus fury. In addition to this, there's a legendary aspect that you can get relatively early where it gives you a chance to fully restore spirit on a hit. Storm Strike, it gives you 25% damage reduction when you deal damage with it. Meaning you can constantly have 25% damage reduction up at all times. And it chains to enemies. So you're dealing good damage. I mean, 28% damage to a single target isn't great. But you can also apply that damage to up to 4 enemies in total. Then there's Earth Spike, which hits in a straight line and gives you a stun chance and fortify, which is pretty good. Look at those skill sets. Lightning Storm is a chainable skill that just lets you spend a shit ton of mana and just area effect nuke damage at the cost of mana. And it stuns, it vulnerables, it immobilizes. It's very good. Tornado is a random skill that does good bursty damage, and if you can get legendary aspects for this, it's the key skill in the game that almost every druid runs, even though I'm not a fan. And you get Landslide, which is just a chunky damage that immobilizes randomly and stuns randomly. It's pretty good, right? Look at your passive damage. You have Boulder. It's a short cooldown. It rolls enemies away from you. It does bonus damage and stun. Or you can run Hurricane, which is just passive area of effect damage around you that gives you vulnerable. You can get tons of damage off of the build. Then you go to the ultimates. You have Cataclysm, which is the best ultimate in the Druid trait. What does it do? It follows you for a good duration. It follows you for a quarter of its cooldown. Let's be clear on that. A quarter of its cooldown is what it's active for. And it just summons lightning and tornadoes that are just awesome. And Cataclysm stacks with Hurricane. So you can basically get, for 15 seconds, this double storm of damage around you. That gives tons of lightning damage. Look at the passives that are available in the tree. 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable. Increased duration of those two skills. Free lightning damage. Free vulnerable and lightning damage. Free lightning damage and immobilizing. Everything is just immobilized, stun, vulnerable, lightning. Tons of free area damage. Then you look at Petrify and it's a stun. It stuns all enemies that are nearby. You get crowd control. The stun goes up for a second. And you can get some spirit back. Yay. Love the 50-second cooldown for a gimmick stun. Couldn't get this anywhere else. And again, nature skills right here. They want you to shapeshift between the two. You have to make a build for that. But what makes Druid good? Because I'm naming off, like, all these options, and I've yet to talk about defensive options. Well, you have Blood Howl, which is fantastic because it's just a burst heal. But there's also Cyclone Armor, which is just passive damage reduction. And when you activate it, you knock back enemies away from you. That can either be vulnerable or give you bonus damage reduction. Okay, but there's an aspect for this where this bonus applies to your allies. Earthen Bulwark is mandatory. Why would you say that? It's a 16-second cooldown. It gives you a barrier that's half of your health and damage. And it grants you unstoppable while active. What does this do? It takes away 2 of your biggest issues off of 2 skill points. Much like Rallying Cry, this is mandatory. It's in every build. Why would I run an ultimate in any build when I'm running Earthen Bulwark? Because it's just better. Again, if I had to get a second or third skill for this build in particular, you know where my second and third skills are going? Cyclone Armor, Blood Howl. Then, maybe Boulder. Look at the passives in this tree. This build requires you to stay in Werebear form to get the bonus. So you need to run Grizzly Rage. This build right here requires you to be able to stay in both for mediocre bonuses. This build is okay if you're running pretty much just Claw. You can run Claw with this and be fine because you're going to spam that a lot. And it's a like every so often you get bonus damage, I guess. This is broken if you can run multiples. This also triggers defensive skills, by the way, so you can cast Earthen Bulwark and get Cyclone Armor for free. You can cast Boulder and get Hurricane for free. You can cast Landslide and get Tornado for free. You can cast Wind Shear and get Earth Spike for free. This is just great if you run at least one of the other class. This is great for Pure Storm. This is mediocre at best because it's 5% chance for either crits, which aren't good for Earth builds. Earth build wants stun, or restore all of your spirit, which is okay, I guess, if you're spamming spirit into the ground. And again, the passives are mostly fortify or exclusive to your build. Like this character, look at what I did on this character right here. This is max, right? This is maxed, right? This is literally 1 point in it, because that's all it needs. This is maxed. This is maxed. And the rest of my skill points are in passive. I have no incentive to max this. It's good at 2 points. This extra fortify is just icing on the cake for me. Like, people say, oh, Druid is terrible. No, no, no. It's just that Druid's combo potential is terrible. Like all the classes, it has great defensive options and nothing else. That's going to segue me to the last class to talk about. And I'm sorry it took me this long to get to Necromancer. Necromancer's biggest problem that makes it feel weak is, unlike the other classes in the game, it has no defensive options available to it. So Necromancer's gimmick is its ability to summon. Unlike previous Diablo, Diablo 2, where you get a bottom skill bar, you hold L2 and press other buttons, and you get an extra 5 or 6 casts. You get extra 5 or 6 skills. And that makes Summon Mancer very good, because Summon Mancer in Diablo 3 had the same issue. Summon Mancer in Diablo 3's problem was, if you run a skeleton and you run a golem, you lose a third of your skill bar. Plus a mana generator, a mana spender, and an ultimate. You only got 1 free skill. And you had the exact same problem in this game, and that's why no one plays Summon Mancer. But if you play a solo Mancer, you have 1 build. 1 build. And the problem that this class has in particular, this class is the most egregious when it comes to shitty ultimates and shitty passives. Okay? First off, skeleton warriors and skeleton mages are controlled off the same button. Thank God. Because if I had to lose 50% of my skill bar for warriors or mages, 90% of the Summon Necromancer community wouldn't even run them. We just sacrifice them. But again, look at the choices you have available to you, right? Look at Skirmishers. 30% increased damage, 15% reduced life. Fair trade-off. What are my bonuses? A 5th warrior? Or random crit? If I sacrifice it, my crit chance goes up by 5%? That's it? That's only good in a bone build. And a bone build works best with minions. If I run defenders, they get bonus life, which is great. They get bonus thorns, which is great if I build thorns. And they get the ability to negate damage randomly. But you're not going to use that if you're running them, because there's a passive in your skill tree you're going to run instead that negates that. Okay, so, oh great, I can sacrifice these guys, right? It's 15% non-physical resistance. What is non-physical resistance, you mean? It's ice, lightning, fire, poison, shadow. Yay? But resistances don't matter in this game, like in D2. Or even D3. Okay, so I get the Reapers in, right? I get these powerful attacks every 10 seconds. They just automatically do these big slam attacks. Oh. 15% chance to form a corpse. Or Reaper attacks against crowd control enemies. Reduce the cooldown on the wind-up attack from 10 to 8. Oh. That's not great. And then, oh, I could sacrifice these guys then, definitely, right? Solomancer for the 15% increase shadow damage. So 2 of these bonuses right here are build specific, and 1 just sucks. If you choose to sacrifice them. If you don't choose to sacrifice them, you lose a slot. Okay, well, the mages are surely gonna be better. Because we get the shadow mages, right? Yeah! They have a 10% chance to stun. Well, that could be good, right? Or an additional shadow bolt every 5th attack. Oh, but my maximum essence gets increased by a whopping 15. Okay, well, surely the cold one is gonna be 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies if I sacrifice it. So again, another Bone Spear Solomancer build. Yay. This is actually one of the, pretty much the only good summon in my opinion of all 6 skeletons. This is the best because the cold attacks chill and freeze, which is an extra form of crowd control, extra bonus damage, and then enemies that are frozen by them become vulnerable for 4 seconds. So Bone is great with summon because of the vulnerable. It's so easy to get vulnerable. And the other upgrade is completely useless, by the way. 2 essence per damage is terrible versus tons of damage. Now you get Bone. Bone mages use their own health bar and kill themselves to deal damage. Here's the problem with that. Bone mages suck ass because they're always fucking dead. But hey, they can give you a corpse, I guess? The sacrifice on them is okay, because it's overpowered damage, which can be a random burst of damage, but it's still relatively shitty. So, yeah. And then you get to golems, which golems are okay. The iron golem is relatively weak. It gets a stun. It gets some area of effect or vulnerable. And you can have a random crit strike bonus. But that's, again, good on a bone build. The blood golem's okay. The 50% of the damage you take is really shitty. Because it means if you die, if you're taking a ton of damage, your golem dies instead. And your golem's one of the best ways you can distract yourself from dying. The healthy bonus is great, because while you're healthy, your golem gets bonus damage and damage reduction, but you have to be healthy, so it's not great for boss fights. The sacrifice bonus is okay, but you're better off having a golem out of any of the summons. Bone is pretty good, because Bone gets bonus life and bonus thorns, or it gets a corpse, or you can get attack speed off of it. So Golem is great. Now look at your skills, right? So if you're a Solomancer, you can actually run multiple skills. If you're a Summon Mancer, here's your build. A random mana generator, a random mana spender, Corpse Explosion, fighting with Blood Mist, fighting with Random Curse, fighting with Corpse Tendrils. That's it. That's your options. Oh, what? You were expecting more? Nah, fam. We fresh out of that over here. Look at your builds, too. Bone Splinters is great because it has random vulnerable. Hemorrhage is great. It has random blood orb heal. Decompose is okay because it forms a corpse every so often and slows enemies. Reap is good because it gives you damage reduction when you hit it and attack speed bonuses. Yay. These are all okay. They're not great. Then you get Bone Spear, which just bursts into millions of little pieces and makes shit vulnerable. Blood Lance, which just pierces and nukes enemies. Blood Surge, which just nukes everything with overpower damage. Blight, which is terrible. Yay. Damage over time. You get Sever, which is... yay. Random damage. Corpse explosion is mandatory for detonating corpses because you have no use for corpses other than either summon skeletons or run Grim Harvest and generate essence off of them. You can get one kill and snowball that into just pure essence spam. The one defensive skill that you have at your disposal in this entire tree is the whole reason why it sucks. It's Blood Mist. You can't do anything when you're in it besides move. And all it does is make you damage immune and crowd control immune. Minuscule heal, minuscule damage, slows your movement speed, requires legendary aspects. The only reason you run it is because it's literally the only defensive option you have. If you're a Summon Mancer, you don't get to run it. Sorry, you don't. You don't have the room for it. Bone Prison is basically a cuckold skill that you just throw out to fuck over your other players. Curses are great, sure, but they take up room. Like, hey, you can slow enemies and crowd control them. Hey, you have one that doesn't cost any mana, and they deal damage to themselves when they deal damage to you. Oh, fuck, a world boss hit you. So, you died, but they didn't. Curses are just randomly fighting for a spot, and they're not gonna have room. Bone Spirit is great in a bone build, but it's a nuke that costs all your essence, and has a cooldown. Corpse Tendrils is great because it sucks everybody in and does a big boom and lets you do big boom damage. If you don't have big boom damage, you don't get any value out of it. And that leaves the ultimates and key passives, which if you weren't already bored by either blood build, bone build, minion build, golem build, right? That's your builds. That's your builds. That's what you have access to. Which have one defensive skill and feel very mediocre, and you lose a lot of creativity by running skeletons and golem, because now you just lose all your bonus skills, right? So surely the ultimate abilities will change that. Random shitty burst damage that requires aspects to be good. A one-time damage hit on a cooldown that knocks back and slows, but it only hits one time, and requires a legendary aspect to hit more than one time, and it's just terrible because it doesn't deal enough damage for a 50-second cooldown. I can run Bone Spirit. This deals 1300 on a low roll. This deals 1300 on a high roll. But I get bonus I can level this 5 times to deal 1700 damage on a high roll. Whereas this on a high roll is 1600. And this is on a 12-second cooldown. This is on a 50-second. Why would I run this? It's outmatched by fucking Bone Spirit. Bone Storm is the one most people run. It lasts a decent duration. It's passive damage. It affects you and a golem if you run it. And you get bonus damage reduction to give you some tank power. It's okay. I wish the 60-second cooldown was a little lower. Maybe 50. 50 I think would be fair. Or it dealt more damage. If it dealt maybe 200, 210% damage, I could justify a 60-second cooldown, or if there were better extension methods of it besides ultimates. Now, you might think, well, surely I'd be maxing these skills out, right? I'd be maxing every skill I have to 5. Well, no. Because here's why. You have to run skeleton skills to buff your skeletons up if you run them. This scales at 15% of rank. This scales at 20% of rank. And this scales at 25% of rank. And then you have these skills which are okay. Bonus damage to minions when you're near them. This one's mandatory, by the way. This relegates one of the defender skills to being trash. Minions can't lose more than 30% of their maximum life from a single damage instance. Meaning the only thing your minions are affected by, really, are damage over time effects. Because it guarantees that your minions can tank 4 hits unless they're affected by damage over time. So that's great. Makes them good for bosses. And if you're a solo mancer, you run these, because this is 18% damage reduction reduced by 2%. So 16% damage reduction if you have a golem up and no skeletons. And this one increases the sacrifices on warriors and mages, their sacrifice bonus by 60%. And you can get a passive to increase that by an additional 40%. What about key passives? This is only for bone. It's broken for bone, but it's only for bone. This is okay for blight, but it's only for blight or corpse explosion with blight. This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. If you have not taken damage for 2 seconds, your minions get 15% attack speed. It becomes 30% attack speed if you have 7 minions. Let's be clear on something. The only way you're going to have 7 minions is if you're not fighting a boss. So it's 15% attack speed, and that bonus is removed anytime you take damage. Rosma's Vigor is the only generic one, and that's just because it's 10% bonus life. So let me get this straight. I have a class here that has 1 defensive skill, shitty passives, shitty ultimates, and has no skills. Why is this class fun to play? Because if you can get it rolling on bone or blood, it's broken. Blizzard really needs to rework how the classes are designed to make them more diverse. Because the biggest issue that I have is this. Unlike Diablo 2, in Diablo 2, if I get gear, I go make a new character, grind them up to where I can use that gear. Diablo 3 doesn't have that, because gear is interchangeable and builds are interchangeable. This game has that issue with D2, where you get good enough gear and good enough skills where you want to make a build for a new character. But then you get hit with this shitty level 10 character cap. And you no longer want to play. And we haven't even hit seasons yet.